Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Joint Public Protection Committee. I am Councillor John Harrison, the Chairman of the committee. Other committee members are in attendance in person and via Teams. We're being supported by a number of officers from 3 authorities, including from the Public Protection Partnership. They're in attendance either in person or again remotely via Teams. Before we start proceedings, I'd like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting is being held both on Teams with councillors present in the council chamber in Wokingham and other councillors and members of staff on the Teams meeting. I can confirm that those present in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are well apart from each other, so there's no need to wear masks. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Thank you. Have we had any apologies for absence?
We have, Chairman, yes. An apology from Councillor Hilary Cole. Councillor Graham Bridgman is her substitute.
Thank you. Are members willing to accept the minutes of the previous meeting as an accurate record of the meeting? Is that a proposal? Okay, and seconded. Thank you very much. All those in favour? That's carried. Item 2, outstanding actions from previous meetings. In terms of the outstanding action on future training, officers have confirmed that we're already working to cooperate across many aspects of the public protection spectrum, and the training would be no different. As I understand it, we already do it with other authorities. Do we have any declarations of interest?
I have not been notified of any in advance, Chairman.
Thank you. There are no public questions received in advance of the meeting, so we'll move on to item 5, which is the forward plan pages 15 onwards. This is to discuss and note future items for the committee. Members and officers, do you have any further items and changes that need to be made here?
Chairman, not a question of adding anything, but just a clarification from officers. I have 2 of the items, well, 3 of the items, 1 in 2 parts. Item 3 for June is annual review of noise policy, and indeed there is a similar item at 23 for next year. Question is, why have we got an annual policy? Is there some bit of legislation that says we have to do this thing annually? Just seems to me, you know, every time I look at a policy, they tend to last for 3 or 5 years at the very least. So I just wonder why we've got annual.
Is there an officer that could clarify that one for us? Is it something we need to adopt every year afresh?
Chair, I'll try and pick that up. I need to go and check that, Councillor Bridgman. It's a very good question. I mean, this will be the first time actually, in fact, the noise policy actually comes to this committee. So I need to go and actually understand a bit more why it's been put on the forward plan to appear every year. But I would be inclined to agree with you that there's very little going to change, I would imagine, between 22 and 23. So I will take that point away and discuss it with the relevant officer. Unfortunately, the officer that deals with that area isn't here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
And a second one, if I may, Chairman.
Please.
Item 12, just to confirm, because we've had these discussions about fees and charges before, that the, in particular, from West Berkshire's point of view, and I'm sure this applies to Bracknell as well, that the cycle for the licensing committee is tied in to this date so that it goes through licensing committee, comes here, or vice versa, just to clarify the relationship between this list of fees and charges and how it goes through the cycle in the other two in the council cycles.
Chair, I'll pick that up as well if I may, and Moira may have something to add to that. So the cycle is designed basically, so the start of the cycle is the Joint Public Protection Committee. If you go back to the original inter-authority agreement, part of the requirements on that committee is to propose a budget to the council, which includes a proposed set of fees and charges. So that goes to the meeting in September, and then the idea then is that it goes into the licensing committees of what will be the two remaining authorities, Bracknell and West Berkshire, in October. That will normally then trigger the statutory consultations and the wider consultations, which will then go back to a licensing committee either in December or January, then before it heads on to its journey through to executive and finally to full council, where ultimately the fees are set.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Is there anything more on this item? In that case, let's move on to item 6, which is the West Berkshire Water Safety Partnership Annual Report. Ms. Winstanley from West Berkshire Council, Service Director for Environment, Transport and Countryside, will introduce this report, but just in explanation, this has been brought to the JPPC at the request of West Berkshire Council, their executive, and will be an opportunity to look at what's happening and to explore if this could also be adopted by Bracknell Forest Council. Mr. Winstanley.
Thank you, Chair. This group came together following a very tragic incident that occurred in near Victoria Park in Newbury, involving a young child that fell into the canal and sadly passed away. So this really brought to a head a sort of a focus on water safety and what ourselves as the council and emergency services could do to come together to try and improve or reduce sort of accidental deaths and injuries through drowning or playing near water or any activities near water really. So the partnership was born out of that group initially coming together. Of course, initial work focused around where the incident took place in Victoria Park, but we've also looked at how we can use our combined sort of PR and educational offerings for ourselves, the police, the fire and rescue, the Canal and River Trust, the Environment Agency, etc., all coming together to try and just make things a little bit safer for those who are sort of any activities near water. So I set out within the report what we've done during the last year. And also what we're doing during the coming year. A lot of promotional activities, also some physical measures in and around Newbury. We're also going to be looking at where we can roll those out to other parts of the district as well. It's been quite useful. It's been very good networking as well with the other emergency services. We feel that there's real sort of mileage in taking this forward.
Thank you. Do members have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Chairman. John, hi. You may or may not be aware, I had a conversation with Sean about the safety features that are being proposed, and it raised in my mind the question of defibrillators across West Berkshire, because you'll know that one of the conversations we're having in Health and Wellbeing Board is on the subject of defibs, and whether or not there is an opportunity when we're looking at safety measures for the canal side, in our case Riverside, in others, for putting defibs in as well. I just flag that up because it may be of interest to Bracknell as well when we have that discussion about whether or not this is an idea, a scheme which might extend beyond the bounds of West Berkshire.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's one I'll take back to the partnership, Graham, and come back to you on. It did come through to me, that comment, and I think it's something that we need to discuss because there's clear synergies. So yeah, I think I'll put that to the partnership, and I'll come back with a response.
Now, obviously, this is not the place or time to do any negotiations as to whether or not Bracknell Forest wants to take part in the partnership. But just for members who may be members of the authority and watching from home, I wonder, John, could you give us, I see from the papers there are some physical measures that can be taken. There are also some educational measures that are being taken in West Berkshire. Give us some more idea about what's actually happening in the Water Safety Partnership.
In terms of physical measures, it's kind of looking at where we've got hotspots. So the first thing is we got together with Fire and Rescue to look at incidents. So creating an incident database, then we could look at hotspots, and then we could look at where we could potentially roll out physical measures. So in the first instance, it was really concentrated on the canal through Newbury. So I've had colleagues from the Fire and Rescue and colleagues from the Council's Countryside Service doing an audit through the canal in Newbury, and then during the next year we're going to look at other areas. So when you look at the audit, you look at whether we could put barriers up, or the like you see the sort of the towers, the cabinets that are there with the throw ropes and etc. etc. So those are the kind of physical measures, and whether these can be not too I mean, you've got to take a lot of other things where you're looking at in the canal into consideration, like access to the canal for the boaters, etc. So it's really looking at it with a sensible view of what you can actually physically do, and not to stop people from climbing out of the canal as well. So it's drawing on that expertise from sort of Fire and Rescue and other partners as well. In terms of education, again, the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue have got a very comprehensive sort of educational sort of machine that they take into schools. So it's really just helping them promote that through other channels as well, but also to look at targeting things like Water Safety Week. We're looking at targeting sort of specific user groups of the canal, and looking at sort of boaters who in marinas, etc. So targeting particular activities in and around the sort of the just to look at the people who may be at risk from accidental falling in the water and drowning. So it's really focusing our efforts where we think we're going to have maximum sort of impact. So those are the sort of the tasks that we're going through at the moment, and trying to get a programme of targeted PR, of physical measures, and just taking that forward. If there was an opportunity for somebody from Bracknell to come along and come to the Water Safety Partnership, we're happy to extend that invite.
Thank you very much. I noticed that Councillor Jones has got a hand up, and Mr. Murphy as well. So I'll take Councillor Jones first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for John. This may be difficult, but does the scope of this include all waterways that flow through our districts? What I've got in mind in particular is the Thames and tributaries, which I think would be quite a lot of additional scope. And I just wondered if that would be eventually part of that scope.
It does. It was looking at all waterways within the district. I mean, the Thames obviously and the main rivers fall under the Environment Agency, so it's good to have them involved. But it is looking at all waterways. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Yes, thanks, Chair. All I was going to add actually to what John has just said is that there is a synergy in terms of some of the educational work and public engagement work between the two authorities, because it's the kind of public protection, I suppose, communications team that have been doing a lot of work with the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service to set up some of these sort of community engagement events. So if it was something that ultimately basically our colleagues or Bracknell wish to engage with, then it would be certainly very transferable to bring some of those events to the borough.
Thank you. And I think this is quite a good idea, but I think we need to probably take this offline. So my colleagues in Arts and Countryside, and also Mr. Jones, Damien Jones, can talk to you a bit further about what would be be involved at Bratton Water, be involved in this water safety partnership. We do have a number of large bodies of water in Bratton Forest, lakes and smallish ponds that I think we may need to improve water safety at, but we have yet to have that discussion. So let's take that one offline. Thank you very much, Mr. Winstanley, for that contribution.
Thank you.
Right. Item 7 on the agenda is the air quality status report, the long-awaited Bracknell Forest air quality status report, I think. And is that Sean or is that Damien? Let's talk about that one.
Chair, I'll pick it up if I can for a starter. Unfortunately, basically, my colleague Suzanne McLaughlin, who was going to present this report tonight, basically, unfortunately, is not available, is unwell. So I will just briefly introduce the report. We may not be able to answer some of the technical detailed questions, but any detailed questions that come from the committee tonight, I'll certainly take away and endeavour to get the committee answers. But as you say, basically, this is the annual status report is a requirement on the authority to submit. We did submit that report within the required timescale, which was by the end of June 2021. So this was the report covering the calendar year 2020. And the other two reports within the JPPC area in West Berkshire and Wokingham, as you recall, came to this committee in the autumn, but this one, for some reason, was delayed. Now, we understand earlier on that there was a couple of minor errors in the monitoring data, but that was corrected. But nevertheless, we've now finally got the evaluation of the council's report back. And I think basically the appraisal of the report is pretty positive. I mean, it's kind of laid out in the report itself, but also laid down in section 7 of this, and it's, I think it's a very positive appraisal of the report that we did submit. The report then just goes on to deal with a couple of other issues, just explaining a bit of an update on where we are with the air quality project, which you'll be aware is a 3 authority project which was DEFRA funded, and this is around the PM 2.5 monitoring, the engagement with schools, and the wider public engagement, and that is going to continue with Wokingham as we go forward as they're part of that partnership around that project. And then finally, basically some sort of concluding comments there. But as I say, if there's any questions, technical questions, we may have to take those away, but I'm happy to try and answer any general questions. Thank you.
I have one, but first, does anybody else have any questions on this report? Okay, my question is along these lines. During 2020, this was a bit of a different year from most normal because, of course, it's the height of the COVID pandemic, and we had people being told to work from home. There was an awful lot of less travelling both on the roads and on public transport. So has that affected the measurements to any degree, or have we compensated to account for the fact that would be a natural dip in air pollution in those monitoring areas?
So clearly there was a dip in air pollution, and that's applied in all of the areas in the PPP, and I guess up and down the country at large. But what we did do, actually, which I think is quite important, is that we made the decision during this period. So 2020, when there was the various lockdowns on and the various restrictions in place, to continue monitoring throughout that period, both at the fixed sites, but also basically on the air quality tubes and monitoring that we put on kind of lampposts and things like that. So we did that because it actually will give us basically some interesting background data as to what things may have looked like, or what things can look like, basically with reductions in traffic. I mean, clearly, obviously, we've all seen for ourselves that the traffic is returning, and obviously the report for 21 will be starting to pull together in the next few weeks, ready for submission to DEFRA. And I'm quite happy to come back to the committee, actually. I'm just going to give a verbal update at the next meeting, perhaps, of what some of those differences are between the 21 report and the 20 report, and we can see what the direction of travel is, Chair.
Thank you. I think we can take a noting report as read, and thank you very much for this report. It's very comprehensive. The one action item is to approve the ongoing and planned future measures set out in the report. I shall propose that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. Anybody want to say anything further on this? Just checking on the screen as well. No, we don't have any hands up. So thank you very much. That is carried. Item 9 is the Public Protection Partnership Q3 of 2021-22 performance report. Mr. Murphy again.
Yeah, it's me again. So basically, this is a summary report that the committee receives pretty well every quarter, and we've been developing the format, as you know, Chair, since over the last sort of 18 months, particularly with the work we've done around COVID. What you've got in this report basically is a summary, I suppose, really. If you look at section, sorry, 6.3, basically it gives you, I suppose, almost the final summary of the work that we've done around COVID. As you're aware, most of the measures and the final, in fact, for the final measures were basically revoked a few weeks back now, a couple of weeks back, and we've just been basically as a service looking to, I suppose, basically disengage from some of the work that we have been doing on COVID and to try and put the resource back into business as usual. So, but you'll see from that we did actually have a very, very busy period, basically since over the December to March period, with the rise in the Omicron variant, led to a lot of work around local contact tracing, visits, and obviously we had some of the Plan B regulations that we had to support the implementation of locally. You'll then see, as the report goes through, there's a bit there on communication, and in fact attached to this is the communication summary for the service, and also basically the members bulletin that was sent out, the most recent members bulletin, which is appended to the report at Appendix B. And then from that, beyond that, we have a number of team updates. And what we try to do with this report is to try and provide a combination of data around things like measures of volume, some of the performance indicators around particularly customer service, which is set out at 5.6. And you can see we've got very high levels of satisfaction now with customer service. But we've given this team update around housing, the work that we're doing around food and health and safety, trading standards, licensing, and environmental quality work. There is also a summary of some of the cases we've had that have been basically taken forward. These are prosecution cases, and there are an example there of 3 or 4 from the public protection area. In fact, 5 cases there from the public protection area since the last report came to committee. And finally, one of the other changes that we've made to the report is, for the first time, we've actually included in there, appended to it, a summary of some of the service compliments that have come in. So we thought they may be helpful for members to see, and if members do feel those helpful, we plan to include those in reports going forward, to just give you a bit of a taste of some of the feedback that we're getting from members of the public and from businesses. So that's the report. At the beginning, there is a bit of a breakdown around issues such as finance and HR issues and IT and the various aspects of the kind of cross-cutting stuff in the service terms. But I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you. It's quite a weighty report, and there's an awful lot of ground covered there. So, are there any questions for Mr. Murphy? I don't see any hands up. So in that case, I will summarise by saying, can I actually move that we note this report and also give a vote of thanks to our officers for their hard work during this past year? And I would note that during the year that I've chaired this committee, it's been quite a challenging and difficult and changing year. It's been a year where we've not only had to deal with COVID and risen to that challenge, but we've also had to negotiate a change in the way that we have a relationship with Wokingham Council. And I think we've probably shown our negotiators in the European Union and the British government how you do a proper negotiation and keep friends on both sides. There are a few things that we probably have left to sort out, but I think it's been handled in a very mature and calm way. Please do.
Add to your comments and certainly echo what you've already said, but I would like to record my thanks to everybody who's been involved in the work over the last 12 months. I think when it started 12 months ago, we saw it as quite a heavy task. And I think the way that it's been dealt with, as you've already said, and the conclusions we've come to is absolutely first class. So I'd like to thank the officers and staff and everybody who's been involved in it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So my motion is that seconded, that we thank the staff, not just note, but actually thank them for their hard work over this year. Graham?
So seconded, Jim.
Thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Please show. That's unanimous. And it's just been pointed out to me that I've skipped item 8 on the agenda. So
I was wondering, Chairman.
that's just me not reading straight across the line. So item 8 is the Woking exit closure report. Mr. Murphy, again, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I guess that last discussion actually gave a nice intro to this report, which actually is, I suppose, the final one of this year, this 21-22 period. As you know, basically since the decision was made by Wokingham back in March 21, we have set up a project team, and we have worked with colleagues from Wokingham, from all aspects actually of the authority and our authorities at Bracknell and West Berkshire, looking at issues such as IT, legal matters, and then obviously a whole range of operational transfer issues. What this report really does is to try and pull all of that together for the committee to just really show where we've got to, and what there is still to do. There is still, where are we, the 14th of March, there is still quite a bit to be done over the next couple of weeks, and there will still be stuff to do basically beyond the 1st of April. But we are aiming for as seamless as transfer as possible of operational matters to the new service, and I've been working very closely with my colleague Ed Shaler at Wokingham on that, and obviously keeping Councillor Soane informed. There are a couple of technical issues in here. So one of the things that we've dealt with in this report is there is a proposal around branding for the new service, so that will be important going forward. And having basically gone all the way around various discussions around the houses, we've kind of ended up back where we started with the 2 authority branding for Bracknell Forest and for West Berkshire. And then, of course, this report also deals with the potential, what I've called commission services from Wokingham. So there are a range of services with which we're looking to continue to work with our colleagues from Wokingham, most notably services around trading standards, case management, some air quality technical work, intelligence, financial investigations, and food standards. So there will need to be some branding, basically, which represents the fact that those elements of the service are 3 authority, and that is proposed at 7.4, basically, which is a kind of shared delivery approach to trading standards. And so that's branding dealt with at Schedule 7.7. We've also talked in here a little bit about the future governance arrangements. So assuming that the joint committee, the new arrangements for trading standards will go ahead in at the end of this month, assuming they're signed off and take effect on the 1st of April, we will still need some governance arrangement for those elements of commission service, and that is going to be through the Joint Management Board. So effectively, this is the last meeting tonight of the committee, the 3 authority committee, and we will be moving to a 2 authority committee with effect from April, with Bracknell and West Berkshire forming that committee. But we will engage with Wokingham in the 3 authority Joint Management Board, which we will move to a kind of two-part agenda to deal with those elements which we have commonality across the 3 authorities, and then those which are both West Berkshire and Bracknell, which are primarily around West Berkshire and Bracknell work. Finally, there's a little bit about section 9 around food standards and food hygiene inspections. Clearly, obviously, one of the things that happened during the kind of various responses to COVID was that things like inspection work was one of those things that basically fell behind, and we did that in line with the advice given to us by the Food Standards Agency, so about the prioritisation of service during lockdown periods and through the last 2 years. Our plan is to get as much of that done basically by the end of March, but what we're proposing is that any of the food standards work, which will be done by trading standards anyway, under the new commissioned arrangements, any of that isn't completed by the end of March, and I don't expect that to be very much, will be completed in the first quarter of 22-23. And then finally in the report, there's a few concluding observations, but the primary things for us to do with over the next few weeks are the transfer of staff, the smooth operational handover to Wokingham, the handover of things, some of the assets and equipment and data that Woking will need to perform their services, and then finally also the sign off of the legal agreements that'll be needed to move all of this forward and bring the matter in relation to the end of the old partnership to a close. And I've alluded to the fact that those agreements will be going to executive in West Berkshire at the end of the 23rd, I think, of March, and Wokingham at the end of the month. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bishop Murphy. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. I am seeing any. Graham.
Chairman, no question, but really just to reflect from West Berkshire's point of view on what's already been said about the goodwill that's been shown in these negotiations, and to thank everyone involved for coming to an amicable resolution, and thoroughly endorsed, and look forward to working with Bracknell, and disappointed to be seeing Wokingham go, but that's their prerogative, and hopefully everything went smoothly. I think it did. Certainly the comments I've had from officers are that we have got to this point smoothly, and I thank everyone for that.
Absolutely. Any other comments? Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to echo those sentiments, really, I just want to put on record my thanks to Sean and to Paul Anstey and everybody else in the PPP, all the other officers who have worked so hard over the last year to make this happen, and in such a great spirit as well of cooperation. So it has been successful. We will be starting a new service on the 1st of April, and we're also looking forward to continuing our relationship through the commission services. So I think it's been successful all around, and I just want to thank the officers concerned for all the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. So it remains for us to approve the recommendation, which is to note the report, to approve the proposed branding, and resolve to receive a report on the implementation of PPP Mark 2 at the meeting in June 2022. Also to resolve that the outstanding Wokingham food standards unrated inspections work will be concluded in Q1 of 2022-23. So can I take those as a group, if there is no dissent?
Can I just clear one point on the branding? Should I abstain on that one, as we would have no part of that as an authority? I don't know how you feel about that.
I think that would be diplomatic, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I'd just point out that there is an element of branding, I think, in relation to trading standards. That's the only thing I say.
Okay, so is that seconded?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please indicate. Against? That's carried. Thank you. So now we shall move on to the final item of the agenda. No, we move to actually close the meeting. So what? I thought we just did. We did the quarter through.
Framework.
Okay, the framework. So we'll do the performance management framework now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I understand Moira. Yes. Hello. Moira, you are on mute.
Sorry,
at the moment.
good evening,
I
Chairman.
knew I'd
Good
have to
evening,
say that at some point in
members.
this meeting.
I thought I'd switched to my mute off. I thought I'd give Sean a break as well and do this item this evening. As was agreed at the December meeting, we have brought a revised performance management framework to this meeting for members to consider. While reviewing the key performance indicators and measures of volume, officers wanted to ensure that the data was both reasonable and meaningful to collect. We have retained the two measures required under the inter-authority agreement relating to finance and customer satisfaction, and the framework ties in with the output set out in the recently agreed delivery plan and the strategic assessment agreed in June 2021. The Joint Management Board considers the data on a monthly basis. We will continue to bring quarterly reports to this meeting. Members are asked to consider if they think that the framework covers all the aspects they would wish to see included, or if there are any additional areas or measures and targets that they would like to see included. Thank you, Chairman.
Does any member wish to ask questions?
Chairman, thank you. This possibly won't surprise Moira, because she and I have discussed targets and KPIs and things in the past. We have a number of key performance indicators. Fine. Some are straightforward, i.e. submitting a particular report or whatever presumably by a certain date or in accordance with a certain timetable. Fine. That we understand that one straightforward. Then we have a number of percentage parameters. So my question about those, Moira, is how are we going to get KPIs around those? Because it's all very well saying we achieve this percent of a number of things checked or licensed or whatever, but unless you know how many you want to achieve, whether it's 50%, 80%, 100%, we need to understand the KPI. And then my real concern is by having a large number of these parameters, which are simply number of something done. So, for example, number of animal feed establishments inspected. Surely that kind of thing, to be meaningful, needs to be a percentage. In other words, are we trying to inspect every animal feed establishment over 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And therefore, how are we doing against a target like that? Some of these, simply the number of things that are reported, the number of things that happen. A good example, number of reported fly tipping cases. Well, if nobody fly tips, brilliant, but there's nothing to report. And if 100 people fly tip and you're only reporting on 50 of them, is that a good result? So simply a thought about how we achieve KPIs out of these measurements.
Sure, I don't know if you wanted to cover that.
Come on, Sean, that's a hospital pass.
I was trying to read. I've only got one screen here, and I was just trying to read the paper as you were asking the question. I thought we had tried to cover those off. So basically, quite rightly, as you say, so for example, if you take food inspections, is a really good example of something where you've got a percentage of X, Y, or Z. Clearly, what you want to know is basically what percentage of those food inspections which are due basically have been completed in the year that they're due, isn't it? And so I think we need to go back and actually look at the point that you're making there. But I thought those things had been covered off. But I can see now, looking at this, that there probably does need to be a little bit of a further look to make sure that the PIs, as it were, basically tie up with the measures of volume. I mean, this is a huge reduction in what we had. And what had happened, basically, we found ourselves in a situation where over the years, the list just got longer and longer and longer and nothing ever came off it. But it may well be basically in going back and trying to strip that big bit, the list back a bit, that we have taken one or two of those percentage ones out that need to be reinserted. But I totally agree. In terms of things like basically food inspections, we do need to basically put a percentage in there, which gives you the committee an indication of where we are in terms of percentage of inspections, for example, against the committee's approved programme of food inspections. So I'll take that point back and have a look at that. The other key question that we really had, I suppose, is which of these would the committee like to see, assuming there's a bit more work to tidy them up. What are the type of things that the committee would like to see? And I think this is a question at the committee that we've perhaps been around once or twice before, but it may well be that we could perhaps revisit this in June once we've had another look at the indicators and measure the tie up with the measures of volume.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I think this is one of these cases where we have a number of measures, so we're seeing how much volume there is to the work, but a lot of that is actually going to be demand led. It's a number of things that have happened, and you then had to the service has had to cope with that. If we're going to set KPIs, I think we need a bit more discussion as to whether we're looking to do a certain percentage, or whether we're looking to do a certain volume of something, or whether we're meant to meet 100%, or whether that volume just leads to something else. For example, with the number of fly tips, we can't really hold you accountable for the number of fly tips that there are, but we could have an indicator of how many of those fly tips have been investigated, how many have led to the identification of a perpetrator, how many have gone to prosecution. So that's the sort of discussion I think we need to have. I think it's quite a complicated thing to do in a meeting like this, but I think we can do this again behind the scenes with our officers and come to something by the next meeting in June.
Chairman, could I suggest that we hold a workshop to look that through outside of the meeting process, rather than bringing it back to well, we can bring the results back to the committee, but have that discussion with members in a workshop setting.
That's right, I think, and I think I would like to consult more widely with my colleagues in Gretnal Forest, and I think possibly also in West Berkshire, as to what those KPIs need to be, because as Sean said, if you've got too many KPIs, you're not really focused. So it's where we want to focus the effort, where that's discretionary. That's the important question.
I mean, I think it's interesting that we've ended up with so many, Chair. I mean, and part of it actually probably speaks to the very scope of the service. And, you know, that comes across obviously in the update reports, and it's come across in the strategic assessment and the work plan for the service. I guess we are trying, you know, that there are a lot there, because what we've tried to do is capture a lot of the main things that we do. But going back to Councillor Bridgman's point, I totally agree about, you know, what do these things mean? What does a particular percentage mean? And a classic one of that was, for example, the number of test purchases, or the percentage of test purchases for alcohol that had failed. Now, is a high figure an indication that you're doing very, very well in terms of targeting premises where there's a problem, or is a low figure basically an indication that you've got very high levels of compliance? In fact, what we really need to be looking at with some of those, and we have chosen one or two indicators like that in this suite. For example, with the food hygiene, with the premises with 0 to 1 rating, it's about improvement. And what we really want to see is year-on-year improvements. And what we do know from the work that we've done, for example, with test purchasing, is the very first times we did it many years ago, the levels of compliance were pretty awful, and now the levels of compliance are pretty high. We can see the trends, but I think trend data is also something that's very important. So when we look at this stuff going forward, we want to have a look at basically what it means in terms of trend. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess the resolution, the recommendation for this that I'll put to the committee is that we continue to review this, and we will do some further work by the next meeting of this committee. Those in favour? Any against? No. Let's check online. Okay, so that concludes the business for this meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Noting also, this is the last meeting that Wokingham members and officers will be attending this in a formal capacity. And thank you very much for your work and collaboration over the years. Wokingham members will be invited to attend meetings and discuss relevant items in the future. And the next meeting will take place on the 13th of June 2022. And I would also like to say, as this is my final meeting in the chair, for now at least, that thank you everybody for your help and support over this past year. It's been a blast.
Thank you, Chairman.
And the meeting is now closed.